Lesson 3, the first conjugation, present indicative active, the accusative case. Hi everyone, welcome back to Lenny's Latin class. Today we're on page 11, at the bottom of page 11, and today we're going to learn about verb endings. As you read the text here at the bottom of page 11, you'll notice a lot of terminology, terms like indicative, personal endings, active, conjugated, lots of grammatical terms. But I don't want you to worry about those right now. Right now I just want you to focus on what we're going to be talking about. Turn with me to the top of page 12, and we're going to talk about two basic concepts that you need to know. If you have already read my book for beginners, Getting Started with Latin, then you already know all this stuff backwards and forwards. But if you're new and have not read that book, then you need to listen carefully. We're going to talk about person and number. Okay? Number is pretty simple. That's referring to if something is singular or plural. Singular means you're talking about just one thing. Plural means you're talking about more than one thing. And when it comes to verbs, there's another special quality that verbs have called person. A verb can be first person, second person, or third person. You may ask yourself the question, why are they called first person, second person, and third person? And that's a good question, and I've actually thought about that myself. First person is a verb that talks about I doing the action, okay? I walk, I go, I talk. When it's I doing the action, that's called a first person verb. Second person is when it's you doing the action. You walk, you talk, you go. Third person is he, she, or it. He walks, he talks, she goes, it goes, things like that. So first person means I do the action. Second person means you do the action. Third person, he, she, or it does the action. Let's say you're an author and you want to write a story and you want to narrate the story in the first person. If that's the case, then as you write the story, you would say, I did this, I did that. That gives it a very personal kind of sound. If you want to write something in the second person, you would say, you open the door, you hear a creaking noise, you enter the room, you do this, you do that. Writing in the second person like that can give writing a sort of an intense or maybe an exciting feeling, the feeling that you're very involved because someone is telling you directly what you're doing. Perhaps the most common way to narrate is third person. If you want to write something in the third person, you would say something like, she opened the door and walked in, he did this, he did that. So that's third person. That's probably the most common way that we hear stories being told. So the three examples I just gave of first, second, and third person, those were all singular. There's also a plural for each one. If it's I doing it, but plural, then it becomes we. We talk, we go, we walk. Okay, that's first person, plural. If it's you, plural, more than one of you, that's second person, plural. In many languages, there is a separate word for singular you and plural you. In Latin, the word for singular you is tu, tu, and the word for plural you is vos, V-O-S. But in English, it's the same word for both. It's you for singular you and you for plural you. So some English speakers try to make up a different word for plural you, words like y'all or yous guys or you people. I grew up in the South, so you could probably tell by my accent. When I was growing up, we would say y'all. If it was one person, you might say, are you going to the store? But if it was more than one person, you might say, are y'all going to the store? So typically in my language materials that I make, I use the word y'all to represent the second person plural. So I use you for second person singular, y'all for second person plural. For third person plural, if he, she, or it is plural, then that becomes they. They walk, they talk, they go. Okay, so if you look at this little chart here at the top of page 12, you'll see first person, I, and then we. I is singular, we is plural. Second person, you. They give an archaic form, a thou. And then the plural form is you. Third person, he, she, it. And plural is they. Okay, so that chart there outlines what I was just telling you. If the concept of first person, second person, and third person is still confusing you, here's a little thing that's helped me to understand it, and it might help you too. If a human being is talking and saying things, who is the first person involved in the process? The speaker. Okay, it only takes one person to talk. For instance, right now I'm talking, so I'll say the word I and then talk. I talk. It's just me. In this activity of talking, I'm the first person. You see what I'm saying? So it's the first, I'm speaking in the first person. Now imagine there's a conversation between two people and I'm talking to someone. I say, you walk, you talk, you go. Now I'm talking about the second person in the conversation. There's not only the speaker, but there's a second person involved. That's you, and I'm talking to you. See what I mean? That's the second person. Now, you and I are talking, and a third person is across the room, and we start talking about that person. Maybe we're gossiping about that person. We say, well, he does this, and he does that. Okay, now, in that conversation, the guy we're talking about is the third person involved in our communication. So think of first, second, and third person like that. The first person involved is the speaker. The second person involved is the person you're talking to. The third person involved is the person you're talking about. Okay, so if you think that over for a minute, the concept of first, second, and third person makes perfect sense. It's all reckoned from the point of view of the speaker. Verbs that are first person are stated in such a way that they involve the person doing the talking. Second person verbs are stated in such a way that they involve the person that the speaker is talking to. Third person verbs are stated in such a way that they involve the person that the speaker is talking about. Okay? So you're either talking to someone, or talking about someone. Okay, I think we understand the concepts of first, second, third person, and singular and plural. Now let's look at how this actually applies to Latin. So it's time to learn a Latin verb here, which is laudo. Go down to section 37 with me in the middle of page 12. Laudo means I praise. We have related English words like laud or laudable. And the way this works is we have a base or a stem for this verb, and we're going to add special endings to the stem, and the endings will tell us who is doing the action, that is, whether it's first, second, or third person, and whether it's singular or plural. So let's take a look at the different forms of laudo that we see in this chart in section 37. The first person singular form, laudo, means I praise. The ending there is the letter O. Second person singular, you praise, is laudas. See the S there at the end of that one. Laudat is third person singular. That's he, she, or it praises. And the letter T is key there. Look at the letter T. First person plural, we have laudamus. That's we praise. Notice the mus ending. Laudatis, that's second person plural. And again, I'll be using the word y'all. So laudatis is y'all praise. The ending there is tis. And finally, laudant, that's a third person plural, they praise. So it's a good idea to memorize these 6 forms: laudo, laudas, laudat, laudamus, laudatus, laudant. So you can repeat those 6 forms over and over, and you can think of what they mean too. I praise, you praise, he, she, or it praises, we praise, y'all praise, they praise. And if you want to see just the endings only, you can look back up toward the top of the page, and you'll see the chart we were looking at a few minutes ago. You'll see just the O, S, T, M, U, S, T, I, S, N, T. These endings are what we call personal endings. Okay, again, you have the stem of the verb, and then we add personal endings to show who is doing the action. Okay, so if I have a Latin sentence that says, I praise the heroic soldier, then I would use the word laudo, I praise. If I have a Latin sentence that says, you praise the general for his victory, I would use the word laudas. If I have a Latin sentence that says, she praises the soldier for his heroism, I would use the word laudat. Okay, so this is real Latin, real verbs that mean real things. One other quick thing that I want to introduce to you before we move on is the infinitive form of the verb. An infinitive is the word to plus a verb. In English, I might say to walk, to talk, to write, to sleep. Those are all infinitives. The word infinitive means that it's not limited in any way. In other words, an infinitive is not a verb that anyone is doing. It's just a conceptual idea of the verb. Okay, if I say to walk, that's just a general idea of the verb talking. I'm not saying anyone in particular is doing it. So in that sense, the verb is an infinitive in the sense that it's not limited or bound in any way. And the infinitive form of laudo is laudare. Notice the ending there is A-R-E. And what you'll find as you examine the infinitive form of the verb, you'll find that the third letter from the end, in this case the letter A, what we're really doing here is we're taking the infinitive, laudare, and we're chopping off the R and the E. And then we're adding the personal endings. In the first person singular, though, that doesn't really work because you would get laudao. In the first person singular, the letter A goes away and you just get the letter O. So laudo. One last thing here. If you look in the middle of the model verb chart in section 37, you will see a section that says principal parts, P-R-I-N period parts. The P-R-I-N is short for principal. Okay, in Latin, every verb has 4 main forms. And once you know those main 4 forms, you can use them to create all the other forms of the verb. Okay? In this lesson, we've talked about the first 2. We've talked about the first person singular form, which is laudo, for the verb we're talking about, laudo. And we've talked about the infinitive, laudare. There is also laudavi and laudatum. Those are the third and fourth principal parts. We're not really using those yet, so I just want you to focus on the first 2 principal parts. So for this verb, it's laudo and laudare. We'll talk more about the other 2 principal parts later. Even though we're not using them yet, it's still a good idea to memorize all 4 principal parts of a verb. It's good to start early in your Latin education memorizing the 4 principal parts because sooner or later you're going to need them. And the sooner you start to memorize them, the better. So when you're a Latin student and you're memorizing a new verb, typically the way you do it is you recite all 4 principal parts. So for the verb laudo, what I would do is I would say this: laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. You could just memorize it by saying laudo, or you could also just memorize it by saying laudo, laudare, just the first two principal parts. But that's not as good as if you went ahead and memorized all four. If you go ahead and memorize all four principal parts, you're equipping yourself better for the future. So the best thing to do at this stage is go ahead and start memorizing the verbs with all four principal parts. And once you get accustomed to the patterns, it's not so hard because a lot of them have the same forms, the same endings. So let's practice this a few times with laudo. Okay, the verb laudo means praise. So we're going to memorize the four principal parts of the verb laudo. Ready? Laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. Laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. So the basic idea here, as far as you learning things, is you need to memorize the 6 present tense forms of laudo. That's laudo, laudas, laudat, laudamus, laudatus, laudant, and what each one of them means. Also memorize the 6 personal endings. That's O-S-T, M-U-S-T-I-S, N-T. Repeat them over and over to memorize them. They're in a chart at the top of page 12. And memorize the 4 principal parts. Okay, let's move on now to section 38, and let's look at some vocabulary. I would like for you to notice that each time they list a noun for us to know, they're going to tell us 2 forms. They're going to tell us the nominative singular and the genitive singular. Okay, again, the genitive singular is the possessive form of the noun. So look at the first one in the list, copia. They also give us dash AE. Why would they give us dash AE? If you think about it for a second, they're giving us copia and then copiae. Okay, when they tell us copia, that's the nominative singular form. Then when they tell us copiae, that's the genitive singular form. So when you are a student of Latin and you learn a new noun, you always learn the nominative singular form and the genitive singular form. As we get more advanced in Latin, this will become very important, especially when we get to the third declension. Right now, we're just in the first declension, so it's not quite as important, but you should know what we are doing here. We're learning the nominative singular and the genitive singular. So copia, copiae, it's a feminine noun of the first declension, and it means supply. In the plural, it can mean troops or forces. Again, in Latin, there are 5 declensions, 5 different patterns of noun endings. So far, you only know the first declension. If you remember, we studied all the different forms of porta, which means gate. Porta, portae, portae, portam, porta, all those forms. Well, we were studying the first declension. Most of the nouns of the first declension are feminine. Not all of them, but most of them are. So again, copia, copiae is the nominative singular and the genitive singular. Moving on to the next one, we have masala. That's a person's name. Grammatically speaking, it comes from the first declension. So it looks feminine, but in its gender, it's actually a masculine noun because it's a man's name. So masala, masalae, that's a masculine noun of the first declension. Next we have belgae, belgarum. This particular noun is plural, so they're giving us the nominative plural and the genitive plural. Ordinarily, we'd get the nominative singular and the genitive singular, but since this one's plural, they're giving us just plural forms. So belgae is nominative plural, belgarum is genitive plural. This is a masculine noun of the first declension, and this is how we refer to the Belgians. That is the tribe known as the Belgians. located roughly where the country of Belgium is today. Next we have another plural one, Celtic Altarum. That's another masculine noun of the first declension, and it refers to the Celts. Remember that the inhabitants of Gaul are a Celtic people. On the island of Great Britain, they are Celtic peoples too. Later on, the Anglo-Saxons invaded Great Britain and pushed a lot of the original Celtic peoples toward the west. So the Celts were pushed westward into Wales and into Cornwall. So that's why the Welsh language is a Celtic language. You also have Celtic speakers in Ireland and Scotland. So in the text we'll be reading, you'll see the people of Gaul referred to as Celts and as Gauls. And those two terms are used fairly interchangeably. Moving to the top of page 13, we have more vocabulary to learn. We have some verbs. This first one is confirmo. That means to establish, strengthen, or affirm. Be sure to think of the different forms of it. Confirmo, you establish, would be confirmas. He, she, or it establishes would be confirmat. Okay, remember your personal endings. And if we're memorizing the four principal parts of this verb, we would say confirmo, confirmare, confirmavi, confirmatum. Moving on, we have laudo, which we have already studied. You know that laudo means I praise, laudas, you praise, laudat, he praises, laudamus, we praise, and so on and so forth. The four principal parts, laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. Next we have nuntio. Nuntio means to announce or report. In English we have a related word, enunciate. The four principal parts, nuntio, nuntiare, nuntiavi, nuntiatum. Again, the second principal part out of the four, that's the infinitive. That means to announce or to report. The infinitive of laudo would be laudare. That means to praise. Next we have a new verb, paco, which means to subdue or conquer. Okay, so paco is I subdue. Pakas would be you subdue. Pakat would be he, she, or it subdues. So you have personal endings. Also, we have our four principal parts. Paco, pacare, pacavi, pacatum. And our final vocabulary word for this lesson, porto. That means to carry or bring. And we have lots of related English words like portable, import, export. So the four principal parts, porto, portare, portavi, portatum. Notice that the second of the four is the infinitive. That's portare, which means to carry. Okay, so as we memorize new vocabulary, think about the four principal parts and think about what each one does, each one that you know about, that is. The first principal part is simply the first person singular form in the present tense. The second principal part is the infinitive. Okay, so think about what each one is as you memorize it. Okay, moving on now to section 39. We have some model sentences. We're going to study these sentences and hopefully learn something about Latin grammar as we go. In the last couple of lessons, we have studied the different cases in Latin, nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative. And we've studied what each one does. In this lesson, we're going to focus in on the accusative case. That's the fourth of the 5 cases. Okay, so here in these model sentences, we're going to study the accusative case. And what does the accusative case do? The accusative case is the case you put a noun in when that noun is the direct object in a sentence. Okay? Remember, porta means gate. If it's a direct object, you must change the ending to am. So it becomes portam. And we'll see that here in our first model sentence, Mesalam laudant. Okay, the verb here is laudant. That's the verb laudo, which means praise. Notice the personal ending is nt. So it's they praise. And then we have a direct object, mesalam. They praise masala. Since masala is the direct object, we must make the ending am. Okay, so notice here that Latin is all about endings. Endings, endings, endings. Laudant has the nt ending. Mesalam has the special accusative singular ending. The endings really tell the story in Latin. So they praise masala. You got a third person plural verb with an accusative singular direct object. Moving on, Keltai mesalam laudant. Okay, this is just like number one, except we have an additional word, Keltai. Remember a while back I told you that in a third person verb, you can translate it with the pronoun as part of the verb. That's what we did in model sentence number one. We translated laudant as they praise. In number two, we don't need to translate laudant as they praise because we have an entirely separate word to be the subject of the sentence. The word Keltai is the subject. So Keltai and laudant together say the Celts praise. If you take away the word Keltai, there's no subject anymore, so we'll translate laudant as they praise. Okay, so if there's a separate word to be the subject, that's the subject. If there's no word to be the subject, you can use the pronoun that is included in the verb. Masalam is the same as before. It's the direct object. Notice the ending is am. So the Celts praise masala. In number three, we change things up a little, and masala becomes the subject of the sentence, not the direct object. So the ending changes yet again to masala. That's nominative singular. Why nominative? Because nominative is the case you need for a noun to be in when it's the subject of a sentence. So masala is the subject. Laudat is the verb. That's a form of the verb laudo. And it's third person singular. If you need to, you can refer back to the chart on page 12. Either of the two charts, the one in the middle, shows the full forms of the verb. The one at the top just shows the endings only, what we call the personal endings. So masala is the subject. Laudat is the verb. The verb is third person singular. So masala and laudat together say masala praises. The direct object here is the word nautas. In the last lesson, we learned a new noun that's nauta, which means sailor. Notice here the ending is as. That's the accusative plural ending. So nautas is the direct object, but it's also plural. So masala praises the sailors. Okay, and moving on to section 40, they just give us a rule to remember, a grammatical rule, that the direct object of a verb is in the accusative case. And we've seen that in action here in the model sentences. Okay, let's move on now to section 41, and we'll do some translation. At this point in the lecture series, we are almost getting to the point where you don't need me so much to take you through the exercises anymore. That is, to get you through them the first time. We're almost at a point where you can start to translate them on your own and then just have me go over them with you. So, if you're feeling confident, what you could do right now is turn the recording off and translate these exercises on your own, and then turn the recording back on and listen to me take you through them. If you don't feel that confident and you still want to sort of have me hold your hand and take you through them, then you can just translate them with me as I go through them. But eventually, the idea is to turn the recording off, do them on your own as if they were homework, and then turn the recording back on and go over them with me to see what you did correctly and what you did incorrectly. So whether you choose to do these on your own or not, let's go here to number 1 in section 41. And the authors of the book have given us some different forms to practice with. These aren't really complete sentences. They're just practice forms. So portant, nuntiant, confirmant. Okay, portant is a form of the verb porto. Notice the ending is nt, that's third person plural. So it means they are doing the action. And the verb porto means to carry, right? So portant would mean they carry, or they are carrying. Nuntiant is next. That also has the same personal ending, which is nt. Nuntiant is a form of the verb nuntio, which means to announce or report. So nuntiant, being third person plural, will say they announce or they report. Confirmant also has the third person plural ending, so it's they doing the action. The verb confirmo means to strengthen or establish. So confirmant will mean they strengthen or they establish. In number 2, we have a couple of first person plural verbs, pacamus and portamus. Notice the mus ending. Let's go over those endings briefly. Yet again, O-S-T, M-U-S-T-I-S-N-T. Chant those endings and it will help you remember them. So pacamus and portamus both have the mus ending. They're first person plural. Pacamus is a form of the verb paco, which means to subdue. So pacamus would mean we subdue. Portamus, that's a form of the verb porto, which means carry. So portamus means we carry. In number 3, we have a couple of second-person singular verbs, confirmas, nuntias. Confirmas is you, singular, establish. Nuntias is you, singular, announce or report. In number 4, we have a couple of second-person plural forms. When I think of the second-person plural, I like to think of the word y'all. Notice that both of these forms have the tis ending. Okay, portatis is a form of the verb porto. It's second-person plural, so it means y'all carry. Pacatus is a form of the verb paco, which means to subdue or conquer, so it means y'all subdue or y'all conquer. In number 5, we get a complete sentence. Belgae victoriam nuntiant. The subject of the sentence here is Belgae, that means the Belgians. The verb is nuntiant. Notice the third person plural ending, which is nt. So Belgae and nuntiant together say the Belgians announce, or the Belgians are announcing. And the direct object is victoriam. That's the noun victoria, which means victory, but it's the direct object, so the ending has been changed to am. So the Belgians are announcing the victory. In number 6, we get another complete sentence, copias laudamus. The verb is laudamus, that's first person plural, it means we praise. Copias is in the accusative case, that's the direct object, and that's the noun copia. And when copia is plural, it can mean troops or forces. So number 6 says, we are praising the troops. Number 7, Celtae amicitiam confirmant. Okay, the subject is Celtae, that means Celts. Confirmant is a form of the verb confirmo, which means to establish or strengthen or affirm. It's third person plural. Notice the nt ending. O-S-T, M-U-S-T-I-S-N-T. Again, the nt ending tells us it's third person plural. So the Celts are establishing, or the Celts are strengthening. And amicitiam is the direct object. Notice the am ending. That's a form of the noun amicitia, which means friendship. So number 7 says the Celts are establishing friendship, or the Celts are strengthening friendship. Number 8, Messala magnam provinciam pacat. The subject here is a person's name, Messala. The verb here is pacat. That's a form of the verb paco, which means to subdue. Notice the personal ending is the letter T, so it's third person singular. So the subject and verb together say, Messala is subduing. What is he subduing? A magnam provinciam, a great province or a large province. Notice how the word provinciam, since it's the direct object, has an ending of am. That makes it in the accusative case. Magnam is an adjective modifying provinciam. So magnam has to match the ending of provinciam. If we said Messala pacat magna provincia, that wouldn't make any sense. It would have the wrong endings. You have to have the accusative ending both for the noun and the adjective that modifies it. That's what we call agreement. Moving on to number 9, nauta litteras portat. The subject here is nauta, which means sailor. That's nominative singular. The verb is portat. That's a form of the verb porto, which means carry. Notice the ending. The ending tells us it's third person singular. So the sailor is carrying. And then we have a direct object. Litteras is accusative plural. Notice the ending is as. When the noun littera is plural, it can mean a letter, as in the kind of letter you send someone. And that's what's happening here. Litteras grammatically is plural, but what it means is a letter, as in an epistle, the kind of letter that you mail to someone. So we'll translate 9 as the sailor is carrying a letter. Number 10, Keltas et belgas laudatis. Okay, both Keltas and belgas are both accusative plural, so they can't be the subject of the sentence. Laudatis is a form of laudo, which means praise, and it's second person plural. That means y'all are doing the action. So laudatis means y'all praise or y'all are praising. And then the direct object is Keltas and belgas. So y'all are praising the Celts and the Belgians. Let's skip number 11 and go on to number 12. Copiae non sunt nautae. Okay, our subject here is copiae. Remember that when the noun copia is plural, it can mean troops or forces. When it's singular, it can mean supply. Here it's plural, so we'll translate it as troops or forces. Sunt is a verb of being. It means they are. It's being negated by the word non. So what we have so far is the troops are not. Then we have the word nautai, which means sailors. This is a good chance for us to review the difference between a direct object and a predicate. Remember that with a verb of being, if you say that you are something, I am a sailor, the word sailor is not a direct object. It's only a predicate. A direct object is a noun that's the target of action. If you say I hit the sailor or I saw the sailor, those are action verbs. So if you do those actions to a sailor, then the word sailor is the direct object, and you would need to put it in the accusative case. It would become nautam. In exercise 12, the sailors are not a direct object. They are a predicate, because you're simply saying that something is something. There's no action taking place. So remember that in Latin, a predicate is going to be in the nominative case. We call it a predicate nominative. So the word copiae is nominative, nautai is nominative. Again, there is no action verb here. You need an action verb to trigger a direct object. So copiae is the subject, sunt is the verb, nautai is the predicate. More specifically, the predicate nominative. So number 12 says, the troops are not sailors. Okay, we're almost done with this lesson. The final thing I want to do here is take a quick look at section 42, and I want to help you see how you can use these Latin composition exercises as ideas for saying things in Latin. Remember, it's very important when you're learning a language to speak the language. It doesn't matter if it's a living language like French or German, or if it's a dead language like ancient Egyptian or Latin for that matter. No matter what kind of language it is, you need to speak the language. You need to say things in the language. When you say things in the language, it makes your mind work in such a way where you gain a greater mastery over the language than if you just read the language. If you only read Latin, you're not going to learn it as well as if you actually start to say things in the language. So with the knowledge you've gained in this lesson, you can start to put together simple sentences. Let's think of some ideas of things you could say. With the verb porto, you could say you're carrying things. You could say, porto nautam, I'm carrying a sailor. Porto nautas, I'm carrying sailors. That's kind of a silly one. You could say, nauta portat litteras, the sailor's carrying a letter. You could say, portamus litteras, we are carrying a letter. You could say, portant copiam, they are carrying a supply. We don't have very many good nouns to carry, but you can still get some practice with the nouns that you do know. You could use the verb laudo. You could say, laudo nautam, I am praising the sailor. You could use a person's name, Masala. You could say, Masala laudat nautam, Masala is praising the sailor. They are praising the sailor. Laudant nautam, y'all are praising the sailor. Laudatus nautam. You could use the word nuntio to announce things. You could say, nuntio victoriam, I am announcing victory. Nuntiant victoriam, they are announcing victory. Masala victoriam nuntiat, Masala is announcing victory. You could say someone is confirming a victory. Confirmo victoriam, I am confirming the victory. Confirmant victoriam, they are confirming the victory, or they are establishing the victory. Okay, so I'm just giving you ideas here of different sentences that you could say. This is a very important part of your Latin education. Close your eyes, imagine in your mind the images and feelings of the events that are happening, and then narrate with your mouth what is happening. Say in Latin sentences that express what's going on. So you're going to say the words with your mouth while you see the movie going on in your mind. And if you do this a little each day, you will make rapid progress with your Latin. If you want to, you can write out these Latin composition exercises in section 42, but you really don't need to. The best way is to do it verbally, to actually say things in Latin. Okay, that's the end of this lesson. One last quick reminder before we go. In this lesson, I'm trying to make everything crystal clear and simple, but if it's still a challenge for you, if it's still a lot to remember, or it's too much for you, there's a simple solution. Get a copy of my beginning Latin book. It's called Getting Started with Latin. If you feel completely lost, just read through that book, and it'll baby you through every concept. And when you're done, come back and do the lectures again, and you'll be definitely ready to move forward with the Lenny's Latin class lectures. So if you're doing okay, if all this makes sense to you, you probably don't need to read Getting Started with Latin. You can if you want to just get a better grasp on things, but you don't have to. But if you're totally confused, I would recommend get the beginning book and go through it. And once you've worked through it, then you'll definitely be ready to come back and do these more advanced lectures. Okay, that's it for Lesson 3. We'll see you next time in Lesson 4.